Prime Day is coming July 16th and 17th. With epic deals exclusively for Prime members, you'll feel like you just won an award.
Oh, wow, I didn't even prepare a speech. I'd like to thank my family for always needing stuff. Also Sam, my delivery guy, for bringing all my awesome deals so fast. You're the man, Sam!
Shop deals on electronics, home, and more this Prime Day, July 16th and 17th.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome to another BRITFLICKS.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is Matthew Jones. Welcome to the show.
Hi there, Stuart. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Now, we are going to talk about 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. But before we do that, we're going to talk about your feature film, The World We Knew. Now, before we go into any details about that, do you want to give a brief synopsis as to what that is about?
I can do that. So it is I like to think of it as a noir film, and it's basically a comparison has been made to Reservoir Dogs. A heist has happened, and a gang of odd individuals have to stay in a safe house overnight. Unfortunately, it looks like someone sold them out. And then, without giving too much away, the house starts to have an impact on them, and things get quite strange before the morning comes around.
Indeed, it does. I think that's enough.
Yeah, I don't want to kind of, people want to watch it, and hopefully, and I want them to sort of get it as they're seeing it, rather than me ruining it, giving spoilers for my own film.
Now, what's interesting about your film, and I think this is the first for me, where you are a co-director with one person and a co-writer with another.
Yeah.
So let me start at the first part of the process, which is writing a screenplay for a film. Where does the kernel of an idea come from that became the film that we see today?
I have quite a long gestation period, so I think I probably had an idea for something like this when I was about 19. And to put that into perspective, I'm nearly 43 now. Like with ideas, you often have about 20 half-formed things in your head for long periods of time. You forget about them, you work on something else. And the way this actually happened is, so we're a production company. I'll just mention the other guys. So there's Andy Orr, who produced this, Kurt Lake, that I wrote it with, and Luke Skinner, who's my co-director. But we're a film production company called Power Square Pictures, and we've all done different roles within that. So we've done 3 projects together so far. And the first one actually wrote and directed with Andy. The second one we wrote together, the second short, and I directed that with Luke. And then originally me and Kirk wrote this, and we were going to direct it together. But then we decided to put Kirk in the film as one of the characters, and he thought that was a lot of responsibility. So it happened all very organically. We're kind of more of a collective rather than having clearly defined roles. We just work wherever we can on whichever project. But over the years, I've known Kirk for a long time. I always respected him. I mean, he's a novelist. He's been a musician, journalist. And I'd always wanted to do a project with him. And one day I was like, I'd like to write something with you, Kirk. And he knew about all of my half-baked ideas. I said, you can pick, and whatever it is, we'll have a go. And actually, I can't give away the working title because it's all that tells you what the film is. And he picked this one. And I was like, oh, come on, man, I've got better ideas than this. Let's do something else. And he's like, no, this could be great. So we developed it. We got a script done in a couple of weeks, which originally we'd written to sell to get money to develop another independent project. But a few readers read it and sort of said, if you sell this, you're not going to get a lot of money for it. And the things that make it interesting will be the first things to be stripped out. And people will try and make it a lot more generic. Whereas if you attempt to do this yourself, you can keep the bits that you actually love, the things that mean a lot to you. And that was quite interesting, really. We thought, well, let's just try and do it.
Is that a suggestion? Because I think you straddle genres, don't you? It's a noir that arguably becomes a straight out horror film.
And also, I think tonally, we're quite interested more in like art house. So we didn't want it to be straight genre or art house. We wanted to straddle them, and hopefully, one of the concerns is that you could fall in the gap in the middle, so you don't appeal to the art house fans and you don't appeal to the genre fans. So you're kind of aware of that. So we always had in the back of our minds when we were actually making it that if one side's not balancing, we'll head more towards the other side. It could have developed on the shoot into more straight genre. We could have gone towards pretentious if we'd wanted to. But in the end, we found this balance that we thought worked, and we kind of went there with it.
So when you've decided to work together, and writing is very much a solo pursuit, so then when you introduce somebody else into the process, it naturally is a collaboration, but that collaboration can be cut, sliced and diced in many different ways. So how did the collaboration work between you and Kirk?
Well, I've kind of had a bad habit of sort of starting projects and then getting obsessed with something else and dropping something and just moving on to the next.
That's not like writers to look at the shiny thing when they've given up on the...
Well, the nebulous idea is always more beautiful than the nuts and bolts of something that's already getting away from you. So it's easy to be a magpie and just jump on, like, the next one, this is the one, this is the opus, this is the work of genius. I'm bored of this one. But sort of to prove myself to him, I think we spoke about it. I went home and I just wrote like 8 pages of just a sequence that occurred to me. And I sent it to him. So it was done in sort of 6 hours. And to tell you the truth, it went into the film nearly as written.
Oh, wow.
It was just, I was excited. And sometimes...
It must have lived in your subconscious, eh?
Yeah. And it's a strange bit where someone retells a myth. It fits quite late in the film. It was enough to get Kirk on board. And I don't know how people normally collaborate. Obviously, there was a lot of conversations, but we just broke it into sections. So he would have a pass at one section, I would do another section, and then we'd swap. So you got this nice editing process going on.
Right.
And then we would sit down together and smooth it out. And I think we did maybe 13, 14 drafts to get it super tight, to cut out things that were going to cost a lot of money. The characters change quite a lot because it is just a character piece. It is just like 6 guys in a single location. So they need to be quite strong. And also we were kind of trying to be realistic. If you want a good cast in a very low budget film like this, you've got to give everyone their moment in the sun and something to do. So that was a real, key bit of writing it. It's like, everyone gets this strong moment, because that way you might get actor A or actor B rather than having to
because your story kind of, it reveals itself to have a central character, but actually it does feel like it is shared around. Everyone gets their moment in the sun for sure.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, because of the cast. I think we were quite lucky. Lucky. A lot of work. We spent a year getting these guys together, because that's... When you're making something, it's a tiny budget. We've been trying to hide how cheap it was, but now it's out there. So it's like we feel it actually makes it a bit more impressive, like the limitations that we had.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that you can control that I think go amiss in a lot of independent film, where not enough love's put on set or costume and dialogue and getting the right cast. And these are things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but they add up to making something much more complete. We wanted to make, a real film. We wanted to make a proper film in reduced means, and we didn't want to cut any corners. So that, that's where a lot of the time went into it, sort of making things, kind of making cheap things look as good as possible, really. What do you remember? Over that 13, 14 drafts, what do you remember being the main storytelling challenges you had to overcome? You know what it is? Like often we'd do table reads through various iterations. We'd get together and we'd have a few beers and, we'd put on funny voices. And basically, I like to think it's quite a deadpan. I think it's funny. A lot of people miss this. But it's all about your personal sense of humour. I've got quite a dry, deadpan sense of humour. And if it made us laugh, or if there's a sequence going on where we're getting bored around the table, you just address it. And, it wasn't the sort of film where you could have an action sequence to spice things up. So we've got to make them talk about something more engaging here, because if it's losing us, it's going to lose other people when they're watching it. And so it was very much like trusting our judgment. If a page has gone by and it hasn't made us laugh or think, oh, that's nice, it's like, well, we need to do something about that. And I work in quite a sort of collage way. I'm not a very controlled writer, so I'll write 12 pages and eventually dig out 3 or 4 bits, and makes it sort of like boiling down rather than trying to get it perfect at the right time at the first time.
Okay. I like to introduce dogma. So I'll decide I'm going to do 3, 4, 8 pages a day until it's finished, but I'll always stick to that's the minimum.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll sometimes do more, because if I piss 3 pages in an hour, I've got time to keep going. But often, if it took a bit longer, you go, okay, well, that's fine. I've got my pages that I said I'd do. And it's like, you keep a sense of achievement all the way through.
Man, yeah. I mean, sometimes you sit down and you just get a whole scene that just seems to come from nowhere, because, your subconscious already is working on these things when you're not looking at it.
Yeah.
Wow, that was easy. And other nights, it's like pulling teeth. I remember one night we'd both been working on a different sequence, and Kirk said, I was like, oh, how did you do? He said, I got 4 pages. They're pretty good. How did you do it? I said, well, I got 1 line of dialogue, but it's really great. And everything else that I did was kind of crap. And so you're never aiming for the same thing with each time you sit down or each revision, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, look, so moving into the production of it, you've now got a new collaborator, because, as you say, Kirk's in the film, so he thought that'd be too much responsibility to take on board for the film. So you're now collaborating with somebody new. And again, I've interviewed lots of sort of co-directors before. So for you, how did you co-direct? What was the process? Did you agree a process before you started? Did you work out on the job?
We worked it out on the job, because you can't have 2 people doing the same thing. But we have different personality types. Luke is great. He's quite cerebral and organised, and he's kind of better at keeping an eye on the bigger picture, whereas I can be quite enthusiastic, and which could lead you to not making mistakes, but perhaps running too far in one direction. So we had this nice kind of symbiotic thing where together we kind of balanced each other out quite well.
Yeah.
And doing it in the way that we did, the high speed nature of shooting, a feature film, trying to do it in 11 days, which seems
so. 11
now.
days was what you had, but 11 days. You, before we start recording, you were saying that originally wasn't. You had more days. So what?
Well, we had 11 days, and we wanted to do everything, but we realised within the first week, when you're trying to do something that looks great, it's slow. I mean, I storyboarded everything. To give you an example, there's one sequence, it's just some men talking in a room. I think I'd storyboarded maybe 16 setups, 16 different camera moves.
Yeah.
And on the day, it's like, well, we have to condense this to 3, because otherwise we're going to lose half a day. And we lost days in the middle of the shoot. So we already kind of spoke to the cast and crew saying there's going to be pickups. And once we decided that, we could just get as much in the can as we could. And we were constantly, the script was tight, but we were still revising it and boiling it down. Anything that could go went by the end. I like to think it had no fat on the bones to start with, but there's always things when push comes to shove.
Yeah.
We need that. I love this. I really want it, but we'll have to let it go because we're telling the story. It's not you can't be egotistical. You have to be quite pragmatic about, getting the best that you can.
Well, just going back to the idea of setups, because one thing I'm always reminded of, and certainly films that go, I'm going to use a limited location or single location. So films like Jeremy Saulnier's Green Room is a good comparison. what you were doing. And I remember he talked about one of the main siege scenes where you've got 6 people in a room and Patrick Stewart on the outside of the room. And while obviously it's not somebody falling off a 2,000-foot tower, which obviously technically is difficult to shoot and everything, actually when you're on a budget and time is against you, the idea of capturing everything from everyone's point of view, so you've got the drama from 5 people's point of view, because you can't just ignore someone for a scene, is actually a very technical job. I mean, there's essays written about the dinner party scene in Whiplash, where the family sit around and how they achieved it. And recently I spoke to the director, Phil Hawkins, and he was talking about the advantages of shooting a oneer as opposed to all those setups. So if you can choreograph one camera going around, then it's a way of saving time, isn't it, on setups and stuff?
I mean, I think it's a bit of a false economy, because I've read so many directors say the hardest thing is just shooting 2 people having a conversation, particularly if you try and do it in a semi-stylish way.
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? I mean, otherwise it just looks like telly, and that's fine if it's Corrie, but if you're trying to make something that's going to get people's attention because you've thought about how it should look, and obviously with the themes and the mood you're going for, it needs more than just one over the shoulder, one from the front.
That is something we try to avoid, because I think that, I'm not saying people are lazy, but particularly in like big films, so if you watch a genre film like a thriller or an action film, every conversation they do like a medium wide, kind of close, and then they go close and they just cut between them and build it up. And it's like you lose all the magic of, close-ups. Like used to be something really important when you go back to the 50s and 60s. It's like, because something emotional is happening, we need to see the face at this point.
Yeah.
But I think we've become a bit like immune to that now, because everyone just does the close-up, this traditional way of shooting conversations. And that was just something we were quite aware of.
Can you think of an example then where you sort of broke from that tradition and did something that you thought would be more interesting?
I mean, there was one shot that unfortunately we didn't make it in. It was sort of a homage to one of the directors that I'm going to talk about in a bit. And we just came up, I sort of stole his style. And instead of having 3 singles or shooting people, we just got 3 people on a sofa, got a really nice framing, and just let it play out in one shot. And I absolutely loved it. Like the timing of it and leaving these little pauses just with looking at 3 people, it was really nicely composed. And it's like, well, we did that because of time restraints, but it's way better than what I would have done if I'd had an extra 8 hours. So sometimes the path of least resistance, I don't know.
But you're speaking, that's speaking the language of cinema then, isn't it? Because in a way, that kind of lock shot of 3 people talking suddenly becomes what else we're meant to look at. And you as an audience member can still be taking in all the scene. But if you were sat there watching and you are the camera, literally, you're having to decide what to look at. And you're thinking, am I meant to look at just the faces? Am I meant to, is there something going to appear? And so you end up being involved in the shot almost. And then the more you can, sometimes the longer you can make that, the more uncomfortable or the more engaging and more compelling it can become. And I guess that's very formalist, isn't it, in terms of cinematic approach? The idea of that sort of single shot for a moment. Yeah,
I mean, I guess it's like we're all kind of, without thinking about it, we're just like a composite of our influences, and we sort of consciously and unconsciously sort of stealing. We just like we edit everything together. So the things we love, there's no way that you're going to not try and replicate bits of those things. I mean, there's this amazing quote by Jim Jarmusch where he's talking about authenticity. And he's like, artists steal. You don't pretend that you're reinventing the wheel. Like you take from everywhere, like films, books, and you just got to be honest about it. It's like, I love these things. Of course, that's all going to feed into what I'm doing. I'm not, some egotistical maniac who thinks I'm reinventing cinema. There's all these things I love. And when you're actually on the spot on the day and you're doing it, it's like, that's your lifeblood, these things that you genuinely love. So,
oh, yeah. I mean, one of my favourites of that is a music reference is Gaz Whelan, the drummer from Happy Mondays, said that when we went in to do 20 Squirrel and G-Man, the first album, we went in there to make a Sly and the Family Stone album. And what came out is Happy Mondays.
Yeah, there's that famous thing, what is it? It's like a Nirvana song. I'm I've not thought about them for a while. And Kurt Cobain, when he wrote the riff, probably for the It Smells Like he was trying to play something else. He was just trying to work out someone else's riff on his guitar, and he got it a bit wrong. And then there you go, And I think that happens across all creative industries and endeavors, Well,
look, that's a lovely segue, because obviously one of the parts of the film production process is the edit, and often this is where a film finally gets written, because as they say, there's the writing of it, there's the producing of it, and there's the editing of it, and they are three distinct processes. So, can you talk to what for you were the main discoveries about what you had and what came to be the film we see today?
I mean, it is like in a lot of ways fundamentally different. I think if I reread the script, you'd see what it was going to be, but we found something totally different while we were putting it together.
Okay.
To start with the editing process, so our amazing editor, old friend of mine, Will Martin, who was just phenomenal. At first, he was quite resistant to doing it because we're quite close friends, and eventually me and his partner broke him down, and he agreed to do it. The first part of editing, man, and so he put a rough assembly together, and obviously he doesn't look through takes, so you don't get the best take, so it's jarring. If anyone who hasn't made a film will never know how disturbing it is when you see your first rough cut.
Well, there's a reason they call it the suicide cut, isn't it?
Well, that's what Martin Scorsese said, which made me feel better, because me and Luke, when we saw this thing, I was like, we were walking home in silence from our editor's house, like chronically depressed. I was like, can we just buy a bottle of gin? We've not done well. We've gone wrong. And then I read this thing by Martin Scorsese saying that if you don't want to commit suicide after seeing your first assembly, you don't care enough. I
didn't know that part of the quote. Oh, okay.
It's probably being kind of funny, but it gave me a lot of, it lifted my spirits. And then you start whittling away with it. And we had a weird kind of thing with the first edit that I guess technically we only had about 75% of the film. So it's going to be patchy. So you're only building rhythms for sequences, because we knew there were other blocks that we had to pick up just to tell the bare bones of the story. And then you work on it and you work on it and you work on it. And, we were fortunate with, some of our phenomenal cast. All of them were great, but like Johan Myers, Struan Roger, Finbar Lynch, they were so seasoned and they'd done this so many times. They'd been on way more film sets than me. So when you get performances from them, they'd like one take to just do something slightly different, and you just trust them. Yeah. And when you start picking out those great takes and like mixing them together, it kind of feels like making music, I guess, and they're sort of playing off. So you might put an extra tiny bit of a pause in that just creates an extra ambience. And slowly it just gets a bit better and better. And, we actually had to change the time sequence of the film because we had some issues we were shooting night for day inside, and the weather was quite changeable. So a lot of things go out the window and it's not smooth. So we had to kind of move events around. And they're the most satisfying bits of the edit. I remember we were having a huge problem with kind of a transitional sequence going from day to night. And I was just outside. We were editing. We went to stay away to have a full week edit at one point. And I was just like chain smoking outside. And suddenly I had this idea that if we put that there, this here, and that there, I think that's going to work. And it's so thrilling when you think you're stuck. And then out of necessity, you just have one idea that kind of solves this fundamental problem. Mm. And then it also brings the film back to life because you've sort of changed it. So it's almost like you're collaborating with a different thing, if that makes sense. It's like it's not yours anymore. So you're responding to something that you weren't expecting. And it's like, that's when you do have these moments amidst all the kind of the tedium and mild depression of trying to get it better. There are these like beautiful moments when a problem gets solved or something goes a bit awry. And a good example is once we just put the wrong music cue over a scene. Will just loaded up the wrong track by our amazing, the Liminadas, our amazing soundtrack. Yeah. And it was out of place and it was a bit funny and it made us laugh. And I was like, let's leave it there. And it was meant to be this really kind of somber piece because it's quite, it's a dark moment in the film. And some people think that it's like too willfully obscure or ironic, but I just love it. And it was a total mistake. And that was another example of when, a mistake becomes better than your choice. which I kind of like that part of it when it's fresh, when it takes you by surprise. You know,
happy accidents.
That's the magic.
Happy accidents are only there because the other ingredients are present. You can't. The happy accident doesn't happen out of nothing.
And that's something that you get on set as well. Like when an actor might want to try something. You're talking about the dialogue. Often people have quite big chunks of dialogue, and it's like, I think if we take this away and I jump to this. And after having written something and lived with it so many years, you're so precious about stuff. But then part of you has to realize this guy's right, because whereas you're trying to concentrate on everything, you've got the benefit of working with people that they're just concentrating on their one thing. They're just obsessed with this one aspect. So whether it's your sound designer, whether it's an actor, whether it's your DP, they're just focusing on their one job. They're thinking about that more. You're just kind of overseeing everything. And there's a thing that David Mamet said. It's like you have to like overthink everything to the nth degree. So because you've thought about it from all angles and you've obsessively broke down what could happen, if you hear a good idea that hadn't occurred to you before, you've got the sense of judgment to realize that's better than what you're planning to do. So you've built a bed for things outside of what you would have done to come in, and you just got to have the sort of awareness under pressure to realize, man, that shit's better than what I was going to do, so we'll do that. It's the bit that
it's always the bit that makes that I love about filmmaking is this idea that, and I don't think people, I mean, I'm not someone that's directed, but and speak to enough directors now, is that the pressure to be attentive to the most microscopic detail while being able to jump to a helicopter view and see an opportunity when it arises is because I can imagine there's a if there's any kind of insecurity, like stick to the script, because then we know this is okay, but actually, can we invite something else in, or are we creating chaos? And
that's it. And I think the tendency towards chaos could, it's quite tempting. Another friend of mine, because I just spoke to as many people as I could before we did it and read all those books like Scorsese, watched all the interviews with directors. But a friend of mine just said, on set as a director, it's like you're riding a horse and you're holding the reins in both hands, and in one hand you've got to hold it tight, and in the other hand you've just got to be willing to let it slip through your fingers. So you've got this balance of, because when you're stressed, you want to keep things controlled. So you want it to happen exactly like the blueprint that you've had locked in for 5 years. But at the same time, the joy of just sort of like letting it go a bit loose for a bit, it is that real odd balancing act. And I don't think there's many jobs that really are like that.
I like Brian De Palma says in Devil's Candy, he describes it as being, he said, when you start the film, you enter the tunnel, and the only way out the tunnel is the other end. You cannot come back.
Yeah, and a lot of all directors have got their own version of this. Like Kubrick said, because he planned everything perfectly, and he said when you actually get on set, it's like trying to paint a masterpiece on a leaky boat in a hurricane. Because
I've not heard that one. That's amazing.
It's like as much planning as you've done, things go wrong, man. Like someone's poorly, like someone's happened. Like we're in this old house. We shot it in like an 800-year-old house in Essex, and it's kind of like, it's kind of oppressive. The ceilings were too low. We had a DP who was 6'3". He's a big strapping lad. The amazing Lawrence Scott, I have to thank for his amazing work. So it's getting a bad back because there's a lot of handheld, and there's all these things. So you have to take a break, or we have to find a wheelchair to put him in, so you can just do some tracking shots and sit down for a bit. And that fundamentally changes what you were going to do. So it can be anything, whether we were under a flight path, that we didn't know about. It's like when you go and look at a house or a flat, you don't realise about the leak or the neighbours that like playing reggae till 2 a.m. And then something's always there to surprise you.
Prime Day is coming July 16th and 17th. With epic deals exclusively for Prime members, you'll feel like you just won an award.
Oh, wow, I didn't even prepare a speech. I'd like to thank my family for always needing stuff. Also Sam, my delivery guy, for bringing all my awesome deals so fast. You're the man, Sam!
Shop deals on electronics, home, and more this Prime Day, July 16th and 17th.
When you protect your corn and soy crops with Miravis Neem fungicide, you'll start seeing a lot more than just cleaner and greener fields. You'll get longer-lasting disease control, better plant health benefits, less plant stress, higher potential yield, and increased ROI potential. Ask your Syngenta retailer about Miravis Neo and start seeing more green in your fields, on your yield monitor, and in your wallet. Always read and follow label instructions.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
The most amazing things that happened is between the first shoot and the pickups. It's a very old house. Part of it was filmed in a garage, and part of it was filmed there's a small pond on the property. And so we had to do some shots by the pond, and we had to do some shots of the character exiting the garage. And we went back, so we shot in June, and we went to do the pickups in November. And the pond was empty. The water had just gone, and the garage had fallen down.
Jesus!
So it had literally crumbled, which was great.
Isn't that you've basically almost replicated the David Mamet State and Maine, where they go for the water wheel house that's got burnt down 200 years ago.
And then you have to be creative, because you're filming an empty pond, and you have to sort of create a fake garage just to get out of there. It's very odd, but there's all those things that you can't really factor in.
One last question about the film, and it's just the title being the name of a Frank Sinatra album. So where? Well, was that where you directly took it from, or was it?
No, I'm really obsessed with a musician called Tav Falco, who's from the 80s, and he was kind of a rockabilly guy, sort of punk on the periphery of the kind of Cramps kind of thing. Okay, and I've loved his music since forever, and I didn't originally realise that it was a Frank Sinatra song, and then Bert Kaempfert, so there's a lot of people involved, and it just seemed like we had working titles, and then just one day I thought, man, that's a really great title. I mean, but you kind of think maybe you've just gone a bit mad at this point, but then I mentioned it to the guys, and they're like, brilliant, let's call it that. And then obviously we had the problems of trying to get the music licensing, because there's 3 estates involved, because we do a cover version of it in the film. But yeah, that was it. I just really liked it. I thought it was kind of, it was in the sweet spot. And as soon as it had occurred to us, the film just felt like it should be called The World We Knew. Yeah. The working title was really dumb. Again, I'm not going to say it because it sort of reveals everything about the film, but it was one of those stupid titles that we got stuck with it for so long, even though it's just daft. It was hard to come up with something that wasn't that, so we went for something totally different. And,
well, look, I think we've covered quite a lot of ground there in terms of the film. It's available on HD digital, so iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, whatever. The pay on demand video stuff.
Exactly. Just finally, I just want to say we're all amazingly proud of it. Like everyone that I've spoke to after, in the current climate, making an independent film using the means that we had, we put everything into it. I mean, money, blood, sweat, tears. It's your first feature. You're always going to see some mistakes, but overall,
it's a blinding piece. It's a blinding piece of work, and
I think if it finds the right kind of audience, I think a lot of people will enjoy it. Some people might watch it by mistake, thinking it's going to be one thing or the other, and be mildly confused. But it's we did it, and it's the first one. And
you deserve all the congratulations that you can get.
I hope people enjoy it, and if anyone enjoys it, get in touch with us and tell us, because it's always nice to hear from people. That's something that I do. That's how we got the Liminanas doing the soundtrack, because years ago, Kurt Lake, who taught me this great advice, like, if you like something, get in touch with the artist and tell them. So he heard their first EP, said, this is brilliant. They invited him over to France to see a gig, and years later he approached them and a soundtrack happened. So, reaching out to people that you feel a connection with, never a bad thing, because you might, if you're really, really lucky, get to work with them further down the line.
One of the main takeaways from me this was the first time I really noticed Johan Myers as an acting force, and he's just his performance in your film is outstanding.
And he is just the most like phenomenal human being. When we met him through some friends who'd just done a TV show with him, and they said, "You got to meet this guy." So we sent him the script, and we met him. We met two actors on the same day, and we don't have an office as of yet. So we met him in the Curzon, because it's kind of a nice environment. And I was a bit nervous first time I sort of met an actor like in this sort of situation. Obviously I have before, but it was the first person we approached to be in this, so it's quite a big deal.
Yeah.
And he bowled in with this boundless energy, and he just like, he's just got this great presence. And he just like bowled up to me and he said, "Tell me you're offering me this part." And I said, "We're offering you the part." And he's just like, "Come here, buddy." And we had a big hug. And we chatted for a bit, and honestly, I was like, God, is that how easy this casting is? And I tell you what, it's not. It was, and every day on set with him was a joy, like infectious, his energy. And, we are trying to work out something else, project to put him front and central, because he is just otherworldly. He's just, yeah.
No, totally. Because I saw him in Undergod subsequently as well, which he's great in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything is in. I mean, it's just... Yeah. It's got that special thing. I just fucking love him. He's amazing.
Right, we're going to move into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. And for the benefit of those that don't know this format, I'm going to explain it to you, Matthew, as the guest, but also for the benefit of those tuning in. You've given me 3 films. These are films that are important to you, or for whatever reason, and we'll find that out during this conversation. It's about what's made you sort of fall. I mean, for me, it's about what made you fall in love with the form, what maybe made you change your worldview, what made you, maybe what made you the individual you are today. And I think film, all kind of art can come into our lives, and it becomes its own little personal biography of who we are when we look back. And hopefully that's an opportunity for you with this conversation with the 3 films you've chosen. So, and what we do to make the show a bit more fun is add a little bit of jeopardy. So we're only going to talk about each film for 5 minutes. So when we hear this sound, you can hear that okay at your end, Matthew?
I've got it, yeah.
When we hear that sound, that's the time to end and move on to the next choice. I mean, obviously, finish our thoughts and stuff, and every now and again, we'll leak into some time before we start the next one. But generally, it's so we can give each film equal amount of time than 40 minutes on one and then a minute to tell me the other 2 choices. That seem fair?
That sounds brilliant. Yeah, that's good.
So without further ado, the clock is ticking on 2004's Dead Man's Shoes, written and directed by Shane Meadows.
Okay. I mean, firstly, I've sort of cheated with this one because I should have picked his first film, his second film, 24/7. But Dead Man's Shoes, I prefer. But why this is so important is, so I'm from just a regular working class Midlands background. So you're pretty far away from Hollywood. It's not like you guys like Tarantino and P.T. Anderson who grow up and cinema is just like an industry that happens around you.
Yeah.
And 24/7 came out when I was 17. And I was just going through that phase. Obviously, I think music was still my first love at this point, but just getting more obsessive with cinema, going from like casual fan to being quite obsessed. And Shane Meadows was from Nottingham, and he seemed like he was quite a similar bloke. And suddenly there was like proper films coming from where you're from. And it's, easy to like understate how amazing that is. Representation's so important. Like people need to see themselves. And it seemed like, I thought it was so great. It's not like I thought I could do that, but it just makes something possible. So I think it plants the seeds that I can be from here and make proper great cinema. And then fast forward, so I think when Dead Man's Shoes came out, I'd sort of recently moved to London. I was living with a friend and we got hold of it, and I watched Dead Man's Shoes, and it's one of the few films in my life where as soon as it finished, I put it on again. Because it was a real genre film taking place with accents and people that I could I didn't know them, I didn't move in those circles necessarily, but they were in the towns that I grew up in. And it was just mind-blowing. I subsequently read that because he'd made a film before that didn't do as well, so he sort of stripped everything back. And him and Paddy Considine, the amazing Paddy Considine, basically decided to do a Midlands Death Wish. I mean, what a great idea. And it's like, it's rough around the edges, and, you know, you can see the budgetary limitations, but it's just amazing. And it just, you know, would I rewatch it frequently now? When's the last time I saw it? I don't know, but it struck such a chord that you could work on a sort of narratively genre, big canvas, anywhere in the world. It's like, you can be from the Midlands and try and do a Scorsese, you know. And
no, I mean, I'm from a small post-industrial town 10 miles north of Manchester. And when I watched Dead Man's Shoes, I'm like, I know this world. I know the big fish in the small pond, you know, that kind of dominates proceedings, and everybody else sort of is on tippy toes. And then the idea that somebody might resist it is a really sort of inspiring thing for a film. And to see it in a kind of rainy, grey English setting, but then also that becomes cinematic, is really powerful.
And just the humour, like it uses place, so it sort of subverts things just by, because the portrayal of those people and how these people are, they think they're these huge like gangster characters, but they're quite kind of tragic. And like I say, I grew up in a town with those people where you cross the street and, you know, they're the guys you don't want to go near in the pub because they're just bad news. And some of it is just so electric. I mean, I'll say I haven't watched it for a long time, but there's various like scenes cut out for YouTube, and there's just, I mean, Paddy Considine is just at his peak. It's just like so magnetic. And the young guy, Kebbell, who plays his
Tony
brother,
Kebbell, it's his first feature film.
I mean, that's unreal, right? And then the boxer, is it Gary
Stretch,
like,
yeah.
And just all the supporting characters, and it's funny, and it's really moving. But the reason why it had this big impact, like on my adult life, was because it was close to home, you know. And I think there's a lot of that now with people from different kind of ethnic, you know, sexual orientations. Like, there is a real push for everyone to get to see themselves. And I'm just like a straight white guy. But even for me, just seeing working class guys in the Midlands, front and centre, it's potent, and, you know, it really sticks with you.
For me, it's the idea that it, you know, I've seen the equivalent in small town America hundreds of times. And because it's kind of foreign, it feels exotic, and you never think of where you are as having that power. And then to see, like, you know, a pool hall, you know, a pub with a pool table in, and a guy staring another guy across the room, and that causing a scene. You know, I've been there 100 times myself.
Yeah, me too,
you know?
Unfortunately. You know, but so that's it. It's an important film. I love it. And Shane Meadows, you know, brilliant.
Excellent.
And Paddy in particular, just fucking love that guy.
Yeah, no, I think I know it wasn't his first, but it felt like it was the arrival of Paddy Considine with that role, because.
Yeah, I mean, because he's great in Room for Romeo Brass as well, playing that bizarre character, and that's very potent too. Like, it's like where he came fully formed, you know. He could just do the business.
I mean, for me, I don't know about you, but the most powerful sequence in Dead Man's Shoes, and what makes it a really good tale about small town England, and I think for anybody watching it from outside England, it gives you a good insight, is that when he goes after the family that have moved on, you know, so who were there at the scene of the crime, but is now, you know, that's part of his history. Yeah. And Paddy Considine terrorizes him. That's where you kind of know that there's nowhere to go in small town Britain. You know, you are, you know, unless people forget, it ain't ever getting forgotten. And obviously Paddy Considine plays the conscience of the town, I suppose, for want of a better expression. Which it makes, in a way, it also makes it, it's a very, I mean, I put it in my 5 favourite British horror films when I did a list for a thing one time. But also you could argue it's a modern Western. Yeah. You know, you think of the shootout on the farm and stuff, that's pure Western.
Yeah. And it goes without saying, the scene when he has his confrontation with Gary Stretch by the fence. Oh, I could watch that a million times in a row and never get bored. I mean, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's worth watching it for like that 3 minutes alone.
Indeed. Well, look, a very different film is your second choice, and not one I'm familiar with. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I know the film, but I've never seen it. So I'm interested. I'm talking about Leningrad Cowboys Go to America.
So again, this is kind of like I'm not cheating, but it's just the first film I saw by someone who then became, if I had to pick with a gun to my head, my favourite filmmaker of all time, Aki Kaurismäki from Finland. And this one, thinking about this, actually made me quite nostalgic because being the age I am, I sort of predate the internet.
Yeah.
And so this was a
You
case
both.
of I'd just moved to London and we went to Blockbuster Video, me and a friend, on a listless afternoon. And we just picked 3 things, from the shelves that had cool covers. And I saw the name and I thought Kaurismäki. I thought, oh, it must be Japanese. I knew nothing about it. You couldn't research this stuff. And basically this one's about a hapless Finnish band who make very strange music with ridiculous haircuts. And they go on a tour of America. And there's a lot of comparisons between him and Jim Jarmusch. It was that very, I think, 80s kind of deadpan. Some people would throw style over substance at it. But when I saw it, I'd never seen anything else like it. And I think as you get older and you've got so many reference points for things, it's harder to be blown away by things than when you're at the right age. So
absolutely,
teens into your early 20s, like a song could just like rock your world, or like a book or a film. And unfortunately, as you get older, that, you appreciate things too much. You've got more of an interior cosmology of how things fit together. But when you see those things at that age, it's like, wow, where does this come from? Like, what am I looking at? And this is not my favorite of his films, but I have to pick it because it's the one that I discovered. And then over the next several years, I obsessively watched everything he'd done. And I just couldn't believe that he existed. It was like, it just spoke to me.
What in particular was it about the film that sort of felt so new to you as someone? You've seen lots of films before, so for a film to sort of pull the rug from under you like that, what was it?
It's got this sort of like bleakness and joy, and it's like I was a huge fan of, I still am, of like Vic and Bob, and it had this sort of surrealist, deadpan.
Oh wow!
Idea. I mean, it's so funny. They're all so funny, and it's so unique. Like I really respect filmmakers that build their own world where everything is singular to them. So I think, big filmmakers do it, like Tarantino and the Coen brothers, P.T. Anderson, the guy that I'm going to choose next does it. And I like being in a world that's totally unique. And my favorite unique world is Aki Kaurismäki's world, because they cross all boundaries. There's no differentiate. Like, he has moments of like really like deadpan tragedy next to some kind of like almost slapstick moment, and the fact that just everything's there, like real life, it's tragic and it's funny. I struggle with real straight down the line social realism where they just maintain one tone. It's like, oh, because it's serious, we can't have a joke, or because it's funny, we can't go too serious. And I love the kind of the mischief of Aki Kaurismäki, that is kind of like, actually, it's the one person I've ever written an article about for a friend's website, which was a great excuse to revisit his films a few years ago. And it's like they're kind of like manic depressive films, because it's just all over the place, and you move between these emotional shifts, and they just look amazing as well.
Yeah,
the music's, that's the other thing. They're like really cool. I think it's my idea of cool, and it made me realize like there's nothing wrong with something being cool for the sake of it and being stylish.
One of my, I can't remember who said it now, but I remember picking. I often repeat it, maybe get it wrong, but it was something like, you call it pretentious like it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes that's people's defense of going, I don't understand this, so therefore I'm going to say something that I think is pejorative. But actually, being dumbfounded by something and not being able to penetrate is actually quite a powerful thing, and one they're the films that you're still talking about years later. They're not.
Yeah, and I like he's always very, and also the great thing about Aki Kaurismäki is he's a very compelling character in real life. His interviews, it's like he's an extension of his films.
Oh, okay.
I've always quite respected people where their life kind of blends with their arts quite a lot. Yeah. So you get it a lot in like plastic arts, and you get it a lot with musicians. But I think often filmmakers, I don't know, there's not that many where they just feel like their own films. Like he has this deadpan finish, I like a drink sense of humour. And yeah, I just learned a lot from him.
Go on, finish your thought.
just the tone. Anyone who's not seen his work, like, you won't regret it. I mean, he went on to win like at Cannes for I think it was Le Havre that he won for. So he's kind of huge now, and he's getting not softer, but he's getting he's older now. But all of his early films, they're just like anarchic and brilliant, and they just speak to me on a very deep level, which is just always a nice thing. There we go.
Right then, your final choice is actually a choice that, I mean, it's a film that I'm circling around in my pathetic attempts to sit down and watch a film at times. This one keeps coming up and for me to watch, and I keep going, maybe I'm not in the mood for it. It is Killing of a Chinese Bookie, written and directed by John Cassavetes. Do you want to talk to us about where this fits in with your...
Yes, I mean, there's nothing that I've picked that I sort of saw for the first time, I guess, after my early 20s, which is, I don't know if that's sad. I've seen things that I love since then, but that was my formative years.
No, I mean, this is the whole point of the show. I want to know the bits that kind of defined you, not the bits that you kind of looked at retrospectively.
So again, like with Aki Kaurismäki, I mean, this is my favourite of Cassavetes' films. It wasn't the first I saw. It's for anyone who hasn't seen it. So it's about a guy called Cosmo, played by absolutely phenomenal Ben Gazzera. And he runs quite a seedy, like strip club, and he's in debt to some gangsters for gambling bills. So it sounds very generic, and it's about him trying to balance running this quite sleazy strip show, which he treats as if it's fine, high art, with being on the periphery of these kind of Scorsese-esque kind of terrifying gangsters, and him having to do, I mean, the title kind of gives it away. He's basically called upon to kill a Chinese bookie to clear his debts, which just makes it sound like a genre film. But this is where Cassavetes just, he's just totally himself. So he takes that, which on paper, give that to another director, you'd have like a 2.5-star Netflix film. In the hands of John Cassavetes, it becomes something totally different. And the energy and the freedom and the movement, and just is an emotional filmmaker like Aki Kaurismäki. And I think that's why they're my two guys, because they're very human and magical details. There's one sequence in the film where the character Cosmo, he dresses in like a white suit. He looks great. He goes into a little sleazy bar to celebrate having paid off some debts. And he dances by himself, and he gets a glass of whiskey. And on the outside of the whiskey is the condensation. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but there's a shot where it's on his fingers, and he just shakes it off. And you just know so much about this character from this little movement. And it's like this unnecessary detail. And what I really love about it, I don't know if I read this or if a friend just told me this, so I don't know if this is actually true, but Cassavetes apparently considered this his most personal film because it's about his relationship with Hollywood. So this little strip club that Cosmo's trying to run, he's putting his life and soul into it. He plans dance numbers, this quite kind of cerebral kind of dialogues, and it's kind of like vaudeville, like quite carny, but he thinks he's making beautiful theatre. But it's about all of those wild card factors around you, like the gangsters and the people that don't care about art. So it's his way of having a dig at the studio system that he had to work on the periphery of. So he's Cosmo trying to make beauty in this debased environment surrounded by sharks.
Oh, wow.
And when you watch it with that in mind, it just takes it to a whole new level. And,
I feel like I should be stopping this podcast and watched it away then.
I can't recommend it. And that's another one. I mean, I don't think it's happened often, but I finished watching it and then I just watched it again.
So how did you come across this? I mean, you say it wasn't your first Cassavetes film. Was it part of them once you discovered him, you went and watched everything? Or
it must have been a DVD from a friend or something. It was totally random, and I definitely watched it alone and not in a cinema and not with other people. And it just blew me away. His whole attitude to making films. I mean, he was like a one-man studio system, very much like Kaurismäki is. They took control over everything. And he filmed so much, and he was often on camera, and then he'd spend like years, and it always strikes me as like sort of ultra confident, quite tortured. Like he would make multiple versions of the same film. There's like 2 cuts of Chinese Bookie, both amazing. One's an extra 45 minutes long. you wouldn't even notice. You know, they both work in their own way.
Really?
He was obsessive, and he built this amazing group of performers, like his wife Gina Rollins and Peter Falk, and they were like a family. And I really like this idea that, again, like your own little world, where his book Cassavetes on Cassavetes, or the book about him, is just inspiring. Like it pours out of him, this love and enthusiasm. And also why I chose these two, one of the most profound and important kind of film moments I had is like when you want to make films and you love Kaurismäki and Cassavetes over here, you two like pillars, and they're so different on the surface. I mean, the themes of humanity are the same, but they looked at it. One's really still and sort of controlled and stylized, and the other one is rough.
Finish your thought.
And I was really troubled by the fact that I wanted to be like both of them. And then several years ago, I think it was Sight and Sound did a thing with directors picking their top 10 films, and Aki Kaurismäki did one. And he chose 9 films. And then for his top choice, he picked everything by Cassavetes being cheap.
Really?
And I was like, of course he loves him. You know, and I had this like, it sounds daft now, but I had this huge breakthrough that you can love this thing over here, but you don't necessarily have to make stuff like it. It's the essence. And the fact that Kaurismäki loved Cassavetes, it blew my mind. That this guy on the surface looks very different, very controlled and composed, loves this kind of wild man who's throwing around the camera and, you know, not making it up as he goes along, but just letting life happen in the films. And to me, it was so important. It was like, I can like all of them and just try and sail my own course somewhere in the
Indeed.
middle,
I mean, it speaks to that idea. You know, it sounds daft to say it, but like, you know, you can vibe off something without trying to be it. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's like genres of music. You don't just like one type of thing, you know. And if you then were going to try and record music, it all fits in. And I think sometimes these little breakthroughs, they kind of just really help, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to referencing Kubrick, I mean, he always said that he would much rather go around discovering stuff for himself than be recommended stuff all the time and have to queue it up. It was like the idea that part of our own growth is about our own discoveries. And obviously the way you described these were, you didn't plan to discover them, but when you did, they really spoke to you. And that's kind of, whether that be a painting, a book, or a song, or whatever, those are the things that, because one of the benefits of being older as opposed to younger is understanding your own subjectivity is not a crime. And that there are things people can tell you to the blue in the face is the best thing since sliced bread, and you just will not connect with it. And then there are stuff that people are saying, are dismissing, and you're like, you're all crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why this whole process has made me a bit nostalgic, because it's so easy to find everything now and kind of read about it and have context for something before you watch it.
Yeah.
But when you're going cold to something that seems beamed in from a different universe, you know, it's great.
Let's remind people then, The World We Knew is out now. So how can people see it?
It's going to be online and in various shops on DVD. If you're very old-fashioned, get a DVD. Wow.
Brilliant. Well, look, it just gives me to say thank you very much for giving your time on the BRITFLICKS podcast.
And thank you, Stuart. It's been brilliant, man. Love it.
Prime Day is coming July 16th and 17th. With epic deals exclusively for Prime members, you'll feel like you just won an award.
Oh, wow, I didn't even prepare a speech. I'd like to thank my family for always needing stuff. Also Sam, my delivery guy, for bringing all my awesome deals so fast. You're the man, Sam!
Shop deals on electronics, home, and more this Prime Day, July 16th and 17th.
Have you made the switch to Knix? Millions of women have made the switch to the revolutionary period underwear from Knix. That's Knix. Period panties from NYX are like no other, making them the #1 leak-proof underwear brand in North America. They're comfy, stylish, and absorbent, perfect for period protection from your lightest to your heaviest days. They look, feel, and machine wash just like regular underwear, but feature incognito protection that has you covered. You can shop sizes from extra small to 4XL. Choose from all kinds of colors, prints, and different styles, from bikinis to boy shorts, thongs to high-rise. You've got to try NYX. See why millions are ditching disposable, wasteful period products and have switched to NYX. Go to knix.com and get 15% off with promo code TRY15. That's knix.com, promo code TRY15 for 15% off life-changing period underwear. That's knix.com.